When you break an arm, right, the X-ray shows this clean, jagged white line.
It's entirely visible.
Exactly. It's binary. The doctor just points at the screen and says, well, there it is.
Broken or not broken?
Right, which is comforting, honestly, because you can see the structural reality of the problem, but then, you try to fix a broken habit.
And that X-ray machine is utterly useless.
Completely useless. Or you find yourself stuck in this psychological rut that you just cannot seem to climb out of, no matter what you do.
Because we treat personal growth like this mysterious art form.
Yeah, we really do. We just throw willpower at it, we white-knuckle our way through the week, and then when we inevitably crash and burn, which we all do, we look in the mirror and diagnose ourselves with, like, a terminal lack of discipline.
We assume we are the jagged white line.
Right. We assume we are the structural failure, but what if we aren't? What if human transformation isn't a roll of the dice, and it isn't an art form?
What if it's governed by strict, calculable architectural equations?
Which is exactly what we are jumping into today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a fascinating, incredibly dense source text on mathematics and the architecture of meaning.
Specifically chapters K and L.
Yes. And the mission today is to decode the literal pseudo-algebraic formulas for human transformation. We are completely shattering the myth of the solo grind.
It is a massive paradigm shift. We have spent centuries operating under this illusion that if you just lock yourself in a room, grit your teeth, and exert enough individual force, you can transform your life.
Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Exactly. But when you look at the mechanics of meaning and human change through this structural lens, you realize that grit is mathematically insignificant compared to the architecture surrounding it.
I love that phrase, mathematically insignificant, because we are stripping away the motivational fluff today. There are no, just believe in yourself platitudes here.
No, this is about treating change as a system of mathematical equations and operators.
So if you are listening to this right now, if you have ever felt stuck or tried to force a new habit only to completely fall apart 3 weeks later, and you blamed your own willpower, I want you to hear this. It wasn't a lack of effort on your part.
It was a failure of your relational and temporal architecture.
Right. You were literally trying to run the wrong variables through the wrong operators.
And it is incredibly liberating to realize this. Moving away from seeing ourselves as isolated entities battling the universe. When you understand that the friction you feel isn't a character flaw, the shame just evaporates.
It really does.
Yeah.
You can start judging yourself and start mapping the dynamic relational fields and temporal constraints that we actually exist within.
You step out of the role of the victim of your circumstances, and you step into the role of the architect.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to get straight to the blueprints. Let's start with Chapter K, which is called Relational Mathematics, or the Algebra of Two.
The core concept here is that transformation multiplies through connection.
We've all heard that phrase, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Which is a bit of a cliche.
Yeah, it always felt a little too bumper sticker to me. But the premise in the text is that transformation doesn't just add up when you bring other people into it. It multiplies.
The distinction between addition and multiplication is the entire crux of this framework. I mean, solo transformation is absolutely possible.
You can grind it out alone.
You can. You have a baseline capacity for change. But when you introduce a relational field, a co-created dynamic with another human being, you introduce what the text calls a relational multiplier.
Represented by the variable r.
Yes, the variable r. And this isn't just a generic, good vibes bonus. There is a precise structural formula governing it.
Right, the formula is r equals 1 plus, and then in parentheses, attunement times safety times mutual visibility.
Exactly.
And these 3 variables are graded on a scale from 0 to 1, which immediately makes me ask, how on earth do you put a numerical grade on a friendship?
Well, you don't grade the friendship itself. You grade the specific dynamic of the field in that moment.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Let's break down the biological and psychological mechanics of the first variable, which is attunement. In this architecture, attunement is not empathy.
Wait, really? Because I feel like we use those interchangeably.
We do, but they are very different. Empathy is feeling what someone else is feeling. Attunement is the degree to which someone accurately perceives your internal state of complexity, holds it, and reflects it back to you without distorting it.
Okay, give me a real-world scenario of this, because I feel like we constantly confuse support with attunement.
Sure. Let's say you go to a friend and share a highly vulnerable struggle about your career.
Okay.
You're detailing this nuanced situation where you feel like an imposter and you're out of your depth, and you are genuinely terrified of failing.
Right, I'm really putting it all out there.
A friend with low attunement might immediately respond with, "Who what? No. You're amazing. Stop overthinking it. Just be confident."
And on the surface, society tells us that is a great supportive friend. They're hyping you up.
Exactly. But mathematically, in the Algebra of Two, that is a terrible attunement score. That's perhaps a 0.2 out of 1.
Wow, why so low?
Because they aren't actually perceiving your internal state. Your internal state is complex and uncertain. By swatting away your vulnerability with toxic positivity, they are actually projecting their own anxiety about your discomfort.
Oh, I see. They want to fix my sadness so they can feel comfortable again.
Precisely. They aren't attuning to your reality, they're trying to override it. High attunement, like a 0.9, sounds much more like, "Wow, I can hear how much pressure you're under. It makes complete sense that you feel out of your depth right now, given the stakes."
They accurately map your internal coordinates.
Yes, they see where you actually are, without trying to instantly drag you somewhere else.
So attunement is basically the accuracy of the mirror. That makes a lot of sense. But then we multiply that by the second variable, which is safety. And we aren't just talking about physical safety here, right? We're talking about nervous system regulation.
We are. We have to look at this through the lens of polyvagal theory and neurobiology. Safety, in this equation, is the biological ability to take psychological risks without the threat of judgment, abandonment, or retaliation.
Right.
When you're in a dynamic with someone and you don't feel entirely safe, your autonomic nervous system enters a state of neuroception.
Which means it's constantly scanning the environment for threats.
Exactly.
Like when you're talking to a boss or maybe even a romantic partner and you're unconsciously monitoring their facial expressions to make sure they aren't getting mad.
Yes, and when your brain is doing that, it literally diverts metabolic energy and blood flow away from the prefrontal cortex.
Which is the part of the brain responsible for habit change and long-term planning, right?
Yes, the center for transformation. It redirects all that energy to the amygdala, the survival center.
Oh, wow.
So if you are unconsciously monitoring your words to manage the other person's triggers, your safety score plummets, maybe to a 0.3. Your cognitive bandwidth is being consumed by threat detection?
You literally have nothing left over for transformation.
Nothing. A 0.9 safety score means your nervous system is completely at rest in their presence. Your prefrontal cortex is fully powered.
That is wild to think about. We think we're just, walking on eggshells, but we are literally starving our brains of the blood flow needed to change our lives.
It is a biological bottleneck.
Which brings us to the third multiplier variable, mutual visibility. And I have to admit, this one hit me right between the eyes when I read it.
It usually does, especially for high achievers and deeply empathetic people. Mutual visibility requires that both people in the dynamic are seen and real. The architecture completely rejects the therapist-patient dynamic that so many of us accidentally build our friendships upon.
Yes, the fixer friend. Let's say I'm always the designated listener. People come to me with their problems, I help them, I give great advice, but I never actually bring my own mess to the table. I thought that made me a highly valuable node in the network.
A lot of people think that.
But you're saying my mutual visibility in that dynamic is basically zero.
It might be a 0.2, because only one person is actually visible in their vulnerability. You are hiding behind a shield of competence. You're playing a role, not occupying a reality.
And if you are impenetrable, the field cannot permeate you.
Exactly. High visibility, a 0.8 or 0.9, means the relationship holds the reality of both individuals simultaneously. Both people meet in the middle, both share, both risk.
Okay, so let's actually run the numbers on this. I want to see how this plays out mathematically.
Let's do it.
Let's say I have a friend who means well, but the dynamic is flawed. They hype me up instead of hearing me, so attunement is, let's say, 0.3.
Okay.
I walk on eggshells a bit around their ego, so safety is 0.4. And I play the therapist most of the time, so mutual visibility is 0.2.
Right, so if we plug that into the formula, R equals 1 plus attunement times safety times mutual visibility.
So the math is 0.3 times 0.4 times 0.2. That equals 0.024.
Correct. Which makes your relational multiplier 1.024.
Wait, I need to push back on this. Are you telling me that having this person support me adds a measly 2.4% to my solo transformation efforts?
Yes.
That sounds almost insultingly low for someone who genuinely wants me to succeed.
It sounds low because we confuse intention with architectural capacity. Their intention might be 100%, but the structural capacity of the field you've co-created can only process a 2.4% increase in load.
So I am basically doing all the heavy lifting myself, despite having another human in the room.
Effectively, yes. You are still grinding it out solo.
But let's look at the flip side. Let's say I find someone or I cultivate a dynamic where the attunement is 0.9, the safety is zero point 0.9, and the mutual visibility is 0.9.
Okay, let's run that.
That math is 0.9 times 0.9 times 0.9, which equals about 0.729. So my R becomes 1.73.
Exactly. That is a 73% improvement over doing the work alone.
A 73% yield on the exact same amount of individual effort. Because my effort is being held within this highly attuned, safe, mutually visible container.
It's exponential.
This is where I struggle a bit, though. Isn't this just a very academic, complex way of saying two heads are better than one?
Not at all. Two heads are better than one implies addition. It implies I have my brain, you have your brain, and we add our outputs together.
Like 1 + 1 = 2.
Right. The mathematics framework is describing a co-created shared field that possesses properties neither individual has on their own.
I was trying to wrap my head around this, and the best analogy I could come up with is a Wi-Fi signal.
Oh, I like that.
So when you have a standard support network, like the 1.024 multiplier, it's like you are a smartphone trying to send a massive data file to a weak router. It's directional, it's slow, packets are dropping everywhere.
Right, it's a weak connection.
But in this Algebra of Two, with the 1.73 multiplier, you aren't just sending data to a router. You and the other person actually become a mesh network.
Yeah.
The total bandwidth for both of you increases. The capacity to process emotional information, to regulate your nervous systems, and integrate new habits is literally expanded because the network itself is physically larger than the two individual nodes.
That is a brilliant visualization. What's fascinating here is that the math explicitly proves that 1 + 1 does not equal 2 in this system.
It equals 1.73, or more, depending on the field.
Exactly. With the right architecture, the field itself holds more capacity than the individuals combined. The transformation you experience in yourself is always a function of the relational fields you're embedded in.
It's never just you.
Never. If you are stuck, your instinct is usually to push yourself harder, to wake up earlier, to download another productivity app, to force it.
Right.
But this math suggests you might simply need to upgrade the relational field you are operating within.
Which completely flips the script on self-improvement. We are so obsessed with optimizing our morning routines, but if we are doing all of that inside a relational field with a 1.02 multiplier, we are just spinning our wheels in the mud.
We are ignoring the greatest mathematical lever we have for exponential growth.
But here's the catch, and from the text, this is a massive catch. Even if you have a perfect 1.73 relational multiplier, even if your mesh network is totally flawless,
You can still completely fail.
yes, you can fail if you apply that energy at the wrong time. The math doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in a timeline.
Which brings us to Chapter L, the Temporal Architecture, or the Mathematics of Time.
And I'm going to be honest, my initial reaction to this chapter was intense skepticism.
Why is that?
Because most of us, especially in modern hustle culture, believe that if a goal is important to you, waiting is a sign of weakness. You just start today. Any time is fine.
The cultural narrative is overwhelmingly biased toward immediate action. We treat time as this neutral, empty canvas that we just paint our actions onto.
Just do it, right?
Right. But time is not a neutral backdrop. It is an active variable with its own constraints, its own biological weather patterns, and its own calculable friction.
But wait, isn't waiting for the perfect time just a fancy excuse for procrastination? I mean, I know so many people, myself included, who say, oh, I'll start the gym when things settle down at work, or I'm waiting for the new year to write my book.
It sounds similar, but it's fundamentally different.
How is this temporal architecture not just an incredibly elaborate, intellectualized way of putting things off indefinitely?
Because procrastination is driven by avoidance. Procrastination is using time as a shield to hide from the discomfort of action. Temporal design, however, is the strategic allocation of effort based on calculable capacity.
Calculable capacity.
Yes. It is not waiting for a perfect time. It is calculating your available transformation capacity at any given moment and matching the weight of the task to the strength of the system.
Okay, so if you don't calculate the capacity, you break the system.
Exactly.
So how do we actually calculate it? Because there is a specific formula for this too.
Yes. The formula states that available transformation capacity equals your baseline capacity times the seasonal factor times the life phase factor times your nervous system state factor.
It's a 4-part multiplication problem, and the difference in the output is staggering. I really want to walk through a concrete numerical example from the text.
It's the best way to understand it.
I want to show how the exact same person trying to build the exact same habit can face a 25x difference in difficulty purely based on when they start.
Let's run the numbers. Let's look at a scenario of optimal timing. Imagine someone starting a new, highly ambitious project, say, launching a business or overhauling their physical health,
Okay, big lift.
and they decide to start in early fall. From a biological and cultural standpoint, early fall has a seasonal factor of 1.5.
Why is it greater than 1?
The temperatures are cooling, which historically signals human biology to gather and prepare. Plus, culturally, we have a deeply ingrained back-to-school momentum.
Right. So they get a 1.5 multiplier just from the calendar. Let's say they were also in a stability life phase.
Meaning no major disruptions.
Exactly. They haven't just moved to a new city. No one in their families is deathly ill. They aren't going through a messy divorce. Their foundation is solid. That gives them a life phase factor of 1.3.
And because they are in a stable phase during a culturally supportive season, their nervous system is naturally regulated. They are in a state of rest and digest, not fight or flight. That gives them a nervous system state factor of 1.3.
So you multiply those out. 1.5 times 1.3 times 1.3. The result is 2.53.
Their effective capacity is roughly 2.5 times their baseline.
They have a massive temporal tailwind. The work will still be hard, obviously, but their biology and their environment are actively pulling them forward.
Now, contrast that with an architectural failure of timing. The exact same person decides to start this massive transformation in late December.
Oh, the classic New Year's resolution trap.
Exactly. The seasonal factor in late December plummets to 0.5.
Half capacity.
Culturally, it is chaotic. Biologically, the days are short, light exposure is minimal, and mammalian nervous systems are evolutionarily designed to be conserving energy, not expending it. So, a 0.5 for this season.
Let's add some life stress to the equation. Imagine they are in a crisis life phase, maybe a sudden disruption at work or a major financial hit. That factor drops to 0.4.
And because of the crisis and the depleting season, their nervous system is hyperactivated. They are operating in pure survival mode, flooding their system with cortisol.
Just pure panic.
Right. That gives a nervous system factor of 0.5.
The math on that is brutal. 0.5 times 0.4 times 0.5, the result is 0.1.
Their effective capacity is 1/10 their baseline.
This is what the text calls the space shuttle underwater scenario. Trying to start a major transformation with a 0.1 capacity isn't just hard. It's like trying to launch a space shuttle while completely submerged in the ocean with flooded engines.
It is biologically and structurally destined to fail.
I really want you, the listener, to take a second right now and think about this. Think about your own failed New Year's resolutions. Think about the promises you made on January 1st to completely overhaul your life.
You probably lasted, what, 12 days?
Exactly. And for the next 11 months, you told yourself you were weak. You told yourself you lacked discipline. But look at the math. You took a high-magnitude transformation and tried to execute it when your seasonal and biological factors were at a 0.1.
You didn't fail because of your character.
You failed because it is mathematically the worst possible time to start a cognitive or physical sprint.
You are attempting to run a high-demand application on a biological operating system that is currently throttling its CPU to conserve power for the winter. It is an architectural failure, not a moral one.
You cannot force spring and winter.
You really can't.
That phrase, you cannot force spring and winter, is so profound to me. It demands that we actually understand what these seasons represent. Because it isn't just about the weather. We need to map these rhythms so we can align our variables.
The seasonal mapping integrates cultural momentum with our circadian and circannual biology. Let's start with winter, roughly late November through February.
Okay.
Historically and biologically, this is a period of low light. It is when human nervous systems are meant to be restoring themselves. Melatonin production is higher, energy is naturally lower.
So what is it good for?
It is an excellent time for internal planning, for deep reflection, for auditing the past year, and for maintaining your absolute baseline foundation. It is a structurally terrible time for ambitious, outward-facing launches.
So all those New Year, New Me gym campaigns are literally fighting millions of years of mammalian biology.
They are. Then we move into spring, March through May. The light returns.
Rising energy, longer days.
Yes, this is the natural biological time for expansion and growth. This is when you should be launching ambitious transformations. Your physical and cognitive capacity for both consistency and saturation is naturally higher. The environment is giving you a multiplier.
Then summer arrives, July and August, and there is a specific phenomenon mentioned here that made me feel so incredibly validated. Summer brain. Honestly thought I was just getting lazy every July.
Oh, summer brain is a real biological and cultural reality.
Yeah.
The heat, the cultural shift toward vacation and leisure, it fundamentally changes our cognitive rhythm.
How's
Summer is a time for maintenance, for play, for physical embodiment, and for connection. It is an outward relational season. It is generally a very poor time for deep cognitive sprints or rigid, highly structured isolation cycles.
So if you try to force yourself into a 90-day rigid, isolated boot camp in the middle of July, you are fighting the cultural tide.
Everyone else is at the barbecue, and you are resentfully staring at a spreadsheet.
And finally, fall, September through November. As we discussed, this is the absolute peak time for ambitious cycles, the crisp energy, the cultural programming of the school year.
But the architecture doesn't just demand that you passively follow the calendar. Once you understand the seasonal math, you can engage in strategic manipulation.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting. The concept of countercultural timing. This absolutely blew my mind.
That's a very powerful tool.
Let's say you are approaching burnout. Your nervous system is completely fried, your life phase has been chaotic, and you desperately need a profound rest and recovery cycle. The default assumption is, oh, I'll take a break in July when everyone else does.
But what happens when you try to do a deep internal rest cycle in July?
You fight massive FOMO, the fear of missing out. The cultural energy of summer is intensely outward and active. Everyone is posting pictures from the beach, going to weddings, staying out late.
Exactly.
If you try to retreat inward, you feel like you are failing at summer. You end up resting, but your nervous system is anxious the whole time.
Because the environment is antagonistic to your goal of deep rest.
But if you deliberately design a rest-based cycle in September, think about that. Everyone else is frantically buying planners, ramping up their Q4 productivity, stressing out about getting back to work.
And you do the opposite.
Yes. If you intentionally choose September to do the bare minimum, to sleep 9 hours a night and prioritize quiet, you leverage countercultural timing.
Yeah.
You have zero external FOMO because everyone else's activity looks stressful to you.
You use the contrast of the chaotic culture to protect your own peace. It's a brilliant strategic application of the math.
It's utilizing the environment as a tool rather than being victimized by it. And this leads us into an even more granular layer of temporal architecture, which are chronotypes.
Beyond the universal seasons, every individual has a unique biological and psychological signature that dictates how they process change.
I love personality typing systems, but usually they are based on arbitrary traits, like whether you're an introvert or extrovert. This system is purely based on the mechanics of time and energy expenditure.
The framework identifies 4 distinct chronotypes.
Let's break these 4 down. And for you listening, I want you to actively self-identify as we go through these. Don't think about how you wish you worked. Think about how your historical patterns of actual success have played out.
The first is the burst transformer. This individual's biology thrives on incredibly high intensity, but only for very short defined durations, typically 2 to 6 week sprints.
Okay.
They require a clear start date, a hard deadline, and immense obsessive focus.
I read this and immediately felt called out. I am 100% a burst transformer. I can write a massive project in 3 weeks of obsessive 14-hour days. I will barely sleep, I will eat at my desk, and I will love every second of it.
But what happens after?
Oh, if you ask me to write 1 page a day for a year, I will completely fall apart. I will miss day 3, feel guilty, and abandon the entire project. Why do I do this?
It is a dopamine threshold issue. Burst transformers require a high degree of novelty and adrenaline to maintain engagement. When you compress the timeline, the stakes feel high, which triggers the necessary neurochemicals to sustain the effort.
It feels urgent.
Right. If you stretch that same effort over 6 months, the novelty wears off, the dopamine flatlines, and taking action feels like lifting boulders. If you give a burst transformer a slow, steady 6-month plan, their biology ensures they will fail.
Our culture, however, completely pathologizes the burst transformer. We are told we are inconsistent, erratic, and lack discipline. Because culture overwhelmingly glorifies the second type, the marathon transformer.
The marathon transformer is the tortoise in the classic fable. They operate on slow, steady, highly sustainable 6 to 18-month cycles.
Wow, 18 months.
They thrive on daily incremental practice at a highly regulated pace. Their nervous systems are optimized for endurance, not peak output.
They are the read 10 pages a day every day for 10 years people.
Yes. But importantly, their vulnerability
is the inverse of the burst transformer. If you put a marathon transformer into a 30-day intensive high-stakes boot camp designed for a burst chronotype,
Oh, what happens?
they will completely break down. Their nervous systems cannot handle the acute, sustained spike in cortisol and intensity. They will experience profound burnout.
Then there's type 3, the seasonal transformer. This person's energy is deeply, almost exclusively, tied to the natural circadian rhythms we just discussed.
They absolutely must align their work with the calendar. They need to rest deeply and hibernate in the winter and push incredibly hard in the spring and fall.
So if a seasonal transformer tries to maintain year-round uniform intensity, they will shatter their baseline capacity.
They will run completely out of gas by February. And finally, type 4, the opportunistic transformer. This is perhaps the most misunderstood chronotype
Why misunderstood?
because this individual is highly responsive to changing life circumstances. They do not do well with rigid, pre-planned annual goals.
So setting a January 1st goal for December 31st is basically useless for them.
Entirely useless. Instead, their architecture requires them to wait for green lights in their environment. A sudden opening in their schedule, a spontaneous offer, a surge of unexpected resources, or a serendipitous relational connection.
And when those green lights appear, they move with incredible speed and fluidity to capitalize on them.
Exactly. So if you are a seasonal transformer trying to force a New Year's resolution in January, or a marathon transformer trying to survive a 30-day hustle sprint, or a burst transformer feeling guilty because you don't meditate every single morning without fail,
You are violating your own temporal architecture. You are grading yourself against the wrong answer key.
it leads to a profound realization. Consistency does not mean uniformity.
We have completely conflated the two.
We have. To a burst transformer, consistency looks like 3 weeks of intense focus, followed by 2 months of complete, unapologetic rest.
To a marathon transformer, that looks chaotic.
But structurally, neurologically, it is perfectly sound consistency for that specific chronotype.
Okay, we've looked at the macro, the seasons, the life phases, the months, the chronotypes. Now we need to look at the microarchitecture of time and the spiral. Let's zoom all the way in. How do we structure a Tuesday?
Because the framework applies this exact same mathematical rigor to our daily rhythms.
Right.
The transition from the macro calendar to the micro Tuesday relies on understanding biological realities, specifically ultradian rhythms.
Yeah.
Most people are familiar with circadian rhythms, which is our 24-hour sleep-wake cycle governed by the sun.
Sure.
Ultradian rhythms are the smaller biological cycles that occur within that 24-hour period. Human attention, cognitive capacity, and cellular energy expenditure operate in 90 to 120-minute cycles.
Meaning you literally only have about 90 minutes of peak neurological capacity before your biology mandates a decline and a need for recovery.
Precisely. Your brain burns through its readily available glucose and neurochemicals in about 90 minutes of focused effort.
Yeah.
At that point, the system needs to flush metabolic waste and replenish.
Which points to a very common architectural error the framework calls the 4-hour folly.
Yeah.
Oh, the 4-hour folly. This is the idea of, I'm going to block out 4 unbroken hours on Saturday morning to completely transform my life, crush this project, and finally get ahead. We have all done this. We sit down with our giant coffee, highly motivated.
The first 90 minutes are amazing.
We are so in the zone. But what happens at minute 91? For the next 2.5 hours, we are just staring at a screen, checking our phones, reading the same paragraph 4 times, feeling increasingly guilty, and experiencing massive diminishing returns.
Because you are fighting an unwinnable biological war. It is biologically guaranteed to produce diminishing returns and eventual burnout. The structure is inherently flawed.
So what would a mathematically sound microarchitecture look like?
It would be a 90-minute session of deep focus, followed by a mandatory, deliberate 20 to 30-minute break of total cognitive disengagement, walking, staring out a window, doing dishes, followed by one more 90-minute session.
Forcing a continuous 4-hour block is quite literally structurally breaking your own nervous system.
It is. The framework also maps out daily energy curves, which is essentially the practice of matching the type of task to your biological state at different times of the day.
So not all hours are created equal.
Not at all. Mornings, usually the first 2 to 3 hours after waking, are mathematically the peak time for inquiry, vision, and high cognitive capacity. This is when your cortisol is naturally rising to wake you up, and your brain is fresh from sleep consolidation.
Midday is for action, for applying what you know, for execution, and evenings are for integration, reflection, and embodiment.
Yes, pushing deep, demanding cognitive work like trying to learn a complex new skill or have a highly vulnerable, attunement-heavy conversation into the 3 p.m. slump is, as the text states, an architectural failure.
Why 3 p.m. specifically?
At 3 p.m., your core body temperature drops slightly, and your circadian rhythm signals a natural dip in alertness. You are trying to extract high-level performance from a biological system that is naturally entering a valley. You are wasting your own effort.
Which brings us to one of the most paradigm-shifting concepts in the entire framework, the spiral model of time. We are all raised on the concept of linear time.
It's a straight line.
Exactly. The past is behind us, the future is ahead of us, and we are marching forward like soldiers. If we encounter a problem we thought we had already dealt with, we feel like we have been pushed backward on the line.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the linear model of time is actually deeply punishing to the human psyche. It assumes that progress is a straight, uninterrupted trajectory, up and to the right.
Always improving.
Right. But the framework proposes that human transformation operates on a spiral. You are moving forward through time, but you are circling a central vertical axis of core themes and lessons.
Let me ground this in a reality we all face. You go to therapy, you work through an old insecurity, you establish a new boundary, you feel great.
You've made progress.
6 months later, you find yourself having the exact same argument with your partner that you had a year ago. The old insecurity flares up. The linear mind panics. The linear mind says, I have failed. I am back at square one. All my work was for nothing. I haven't changed at all.
But the spiral model reframes this entirely. Returning to a familiar problem or hitting a plateau does not mean you've failed or regressed. You haven't gone backward.
Where are you then?
You are just hitting the exact same coordinates on the spiral, but at a higher altitude.
I love that visualization so much. You are directly above where you were last year.
Exactly. You are encountering the central lesson again, but you possess more capacity, more context, and more resilience than you did the last time you faced it. The view is different because your elevation has changed.
You aren't starting over. You are just leveling up the boss fight. The problems get more sophisticated because you are more sophisticated. The framework even reframes the concept of premonition in this context, right?
It does. Premonition isn't some mystical crystal ball fortune-telling. It is simply advanced pattern recognition of the spiral's curve.
How does that work?
When you've been around the spiral enough times, you start to recognize the weather patterns. You know that when this specific sequence of environmental triggers happens, this specific emotional outcome is likely. Why? Because you've seen the curve of the spiral from a lower altitude before. You anticipate the turn.
It shifts your entire relationship to setbacks. A plateau is no longer a sign of stagnation. A plateau is where the vital work of integration happens.
A plateau is the flat part of the stair step. It's where the nervous system consolidates the gains of the previous climb before it prepares for the next upward curve of the spiral. If you don't plateau, you don't integrate.
Okay, we have the pieces. We are entering the grand synthesis. We need to bring the Algebra of Two and the Temporal Architecture together. What happens when relational mathematics meets the timeline?
This is where the framework reaches its full, staggering complexity and power. We discussed earlier that co-creating a transformation with someone utilizing that relational multiplier can increase your output by 50 to 75%.
You become a high-bandwidth mesh network.
But that entire multiplier is contingent upon what the framework calls the temporal synchronization factor.
Right, because you aren't just mashing two human beings together, you're mashing two biological timelines together.
Exactly. If you co-create a transformation with someone, your temporal architectures must synchronize, or the math collapses entirely.
Let's look at the extreme example of how this breaks down. Imagine person A is a burst transformer. They want to sprint hard on a new business idea for 3 wits. They're going to wake up at 5 a.m., work furiously, and live on coffee. And let's say person A is currently in a stability life phase, so their nervous system has the bandwidth to handle the stress of the sprint.
Sounds perfect for them.
Person B is their best friend or their partner, and they decide to do this transformation together to get that 1.73 relational multiplier. But person B is a marathon transformer. Their biology needs slow, steady, highly regulated 6-month rhythms. Furthermore, person B is currently in a crisis life phase. Maybe they are dealing with a sick parent.
Here is the tragedy of this scenario. Even if the attunement between them is a perfect 1.0, even if they feel entirely safe with each other, their mutual visibility is profound. Even if they deeply unconditionally love and support each other, their combined relational capacity collapses. The temporal synchronization factor might be 0.4 or lower.
Because person A wants to sprint at 5 a.m. every day, and person B's biology is screaming at them to sleep and process their grief.
The architecture is so beautifully blunt about this. It does not matter how much you love each other. Love is not a substitute for architectural alignment. If the temporal gears are mismatched, the system fails.
This raises an important question. Well, I think it's the most poignant question in this entire deep dive. How often do we blame relationships for failing? How often do we tell ourselves, we just grew apart, or they didn't support my dreams, or we were toxic for each other, when in reality it wasn't a failure of love or character at all?
It was simply a severe, unrecognized misalignment of temporal architectures. One person was deep in a winter restoration season, while the other was angrily demanding a spring launch.
It happens constantly. We moralize biological and temporal mismatches. It's exactly like two gears trying to mesh in an engine.
That's a great way to picture it.
If gear A is spinning at a frantic, daily, high-intensity burst rhythm, and gear B is locked into a slow, seasonal, marathon rest-based rhythm, it doesn't matter how strong the metal is. It doesn't matter how much the gears love being in the engine together.
The teeth will strip.
The engine will literally rip itself apart. You have to synchronize the gears. You have to locate where your temporal rhythms actually overlap in order to multiply the force.
Precisely. Which might mean redesigning the application of the relationship. Maybe person A does their burst sprint alone in the mornings, but uses the highly attuned relational field with person B purely for the evening integration and reflection phase, rather than forcing person B into the morning action phase.
You have to design the relationship around the constraints of time, not force time to bend to the romance of the relationship.
And that is the ultimate definition of being the architect of your own meaning. You stop trying to force reality to conform to your desires through brute willpower.
You stop yelling at the X-ray machine.
Exactly. Instead, you learn the underlying laws, the mathematics, the biology, the structural physics of how human change actually occurs, and you design your life in alignment with those laws.
You utilize gravity instead of fighting it. So let's bring this all the way home. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the premise that human transformation isn't a solo brute force grind. It isn't a test of your moral fortitude.
It is mathematically governed, first, by our relational fields, the Algebra of Two, the quality of our attunement, our nervous system safety, and our mutual visibility. A highly attuned, deeply safe relationship doesn't just add a little bit of support. It creates a mesh network that exponentially multiplies your capacity to process change.
And second, it is governed by our temporal architecture, the macro rhythms of the seasons pulling us toward rest or expansion, our life phases dictating our baseline bandwidth, our deeply personal biological chronotypes.
Understanding whether we are a burst, marathon, seasonal, or opportunistic transformer, and honoring that biology instead of fighting it, and the microrhythms of our 90-minute ultradian cycles.
We must move away from linear, punishing models of time and embrace the spiral. Progress is cyclical. Plateaus are the vital terrain of integration, not evidence of your failure.
And above all, when we combine our efforts with others, we must ensure our temporal gears are synchronized, or the system will strip its own teeth.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I want you to internalize this. The friction you feel in your life right now, that project you can't seem to finish, that daily habit that keeps falling off no matter how many alarms you set, that relationship dynamic that feels constantly strained and exhausting, it isn't a character flaw.
You aren't broken.
You are simply operating a misaligned equation. You are trying to run the wrong variables through the wrong operators. You cannot force spring and winter.
The invitation here is to step back, look at the architecture of your current reality with cold mathematical compassion, and begin to redesign it.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Take a mental inventory. Think about the biggest goal you're struggling with right now, the one that causes you the most guilt when your head hits the pillow.
Now look at the math.
Ask yourself, are you secretly trying to run a summer operating system in the dead of winter while trying to sprint like a burst transformer when your body is begging for a marathon pace, all while entirely alone? What if you stopped fighting the clock? What if you found one deeply attuned partner to share the field with, synchronized your gears, and simply waited for your proper season to strike?
The math suggests the results wouldn't just be better, they would be exponential.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Step out of the grind, look closely at your blueprints, and remember that you have the tools to be the architect of your own meaning. We'll see you next time.